Django environment. We are going to look at this app, Paper, which is completely self-contained. This is how to create, let's go into there. This is how to create a usual web page return in Django. First, we use URLs and declare a URL. Here we have that over here. So we've declared some URLs for the server to have a look at. When it matches one of these, it goes along to the views. Here we have views over here. So the URL leads to a view, one of these, and then the view dives into a template to construct the return, and here you see a set of templates. That's all in most basic tutorials. Django's views are constructed on a class-based basis, and there is a hierarchy of classes for them. Let's go and have a look at the hierarchy. Here we go. At the very bottom is a thing called view. Now, the class view really doesn't do much. It accepts parameters, and it does a little trick with the parameters to just reject them if they haven't been declared as attributes, which can save quite a lot of time on inits. The view also takes variables, or whatever you call them, that have been declared within the URL and passes them in. It then does what is called a dispatch, which is a kind of fancy word for saying whatever the HTTP method of the request coming into the server, it goes to a method of that name. So if you've declared an option, if you possibly sent an option or a head or some kind of HTTP method like that, that goes to a method called option or head. Mostly it will be get and post. View also comes with a few mix-ins, which we'll get to in a minute. But the next part of the Django views stack, these class-based views, built on top of that, is something called the redirect view. This is very straightforward. It has HTTP responses built into it, which simply redirect whatever method was the incoming request. Note that view itself doesn't do this. That's right, view is completely empty in its returns, and if you want to send a request back to the server, you will have to form up your own request to send. However, redirect view handles that for you. Also, roughly on this level of the view stack is the template view. Now, although the redirect view is quite simple, template view works on this level, but it involves these mix-ins I've just mentioned at the start. One of these mix-ins, the major point of this exercise with the mix-ins is that there is a mix-in, or two mix-ins, which first make up a template. That is just a big dictionary that's going to be sent to a template. And then these are actually sent to a template that the mix-ins seek out. Now, that's the bit which, for example, is seeking out that a template. Is it in the app itself? Is it in a place that the person coding has named? where is this template? And Django offers a lot of options for either seeking out automatically the template or simply actually naming it. Now, as well as that, the template response mixin can seek out different engines for different templates. So it's pretty sophisticated and versatile. This is the view, the template view, that you will use most of the time if you wish to build your own special response. The view class would probably only be used if you wish to do something fairly special and tinker with, say, the server returns. If you just wanted a free-form start to making a web page, you'd use the template view. Moving on from that, or building on top of that in the inheritance hierarchy, we have the detail view. Now, I've not put it on this diagram for ease of use, but this includes an important mixin called the object or something mixin. What this does is seek out an object. Now, at this point, I don't think it's necessarily model based. This object, in fact, doesn't even need to be a Python object. It could be a dictionary. It just needs some data, to be honest. And the reason is the detail view just shows the information from that data. I think the reason it's not called, say, an object view or a data view is probably because those kinds of names might be both a little confusing and perhaps they would even clash with some core Python affairs despite name spacing. So they gave it this name, the detail view. That's my guess anyway. If you'd like to see a detail view complete with a template, well, let's just go and have a quick look over here. Let's bring up something. There we go. This is actually from a model, from the model paper. It's one single item, item 2. And it has a name and some data and a data creation and the writer. Well, I didn't write it, but I've just left my name on all the items, which is very slack of me, and really I am now guilty of plagiarism. If you think this looks a little raw, well, it does. That's because Django is not really an MVC framework, but it tries to work on the same kind of level, and so any display is basically your business. It's up to you to put CSS on this to make it look any good. There's whole systems available in Django for doing that. I'm just showing you what the raw result will be if you went through a view and a template with data from a model. Going back to the views stack, on pretty much the same level as the detail view is a list view. This is somewhat special within the entire view stack because it's the only one that really deals with a list. As a result, a list of data. As a result, it does have paging and some other things built in, which I'm not really going to bother with here now. But really, it's displaying a list of bits of details, to be honest, of some objects that have been given. Again, I don't think there's a necessity for things to be part of the Django model idea here. Django's very good at dropping out and letting you just do however much you want to use of it, you can use it. Let's go and have a look at a list view, shall we? Back up here. And there's a list. These are the things that were entered into the model paper, or the information in the database table, if you like. Title, author, creation, and date are here. And you see there's, I don't know, about 8 items within this database. Again, it's very, very raw. There is no cascading style sheets used here. I'm just demonstrating what the view can do with the template. Right, back to the view stack. We now move on to a whole new level, which involves another mix-in or two, which I've not really mentioned here, which is to do with dealing with forms. Now, Django's form view does assume that you go back to the same view. So you get the original form, it goes out to your user, the user posts it, and the post goes back to the same place. This is an assumption made by a lot of web form builders. There's nothing special to Django there, and flexibility there might involve just a bit too much complication, I guess. Form view doesn't actually do much on its own. Really, you just get the form back again, if I recall correctly, and you've got to do something about it and stick it into the context. It may get stuck into the context anyway, but I mean, if you actually want to take some action with the resulting validated form, then you're gonna have to do something about it yourself. However, these three other views are not like that. Perhaps I should be lower down in my diagram, but I've kept them on the same level. I think they're in the same file. These are plainly the CUD, create, update, delete form views. The create view, I did mention that the detail view actually hunts for an object. The list view actually hunts for a whole list of objects. And the create view does inherit this gear, just for, well, I suppose, logicality or something, or because it's too difficult not to. But of course it doesn't need it, because we have no objects existing before the create view gets to work, before that form comes in and we actually add the extra data to something. The create view solves this simply by returning a none on the get object method of the detail view. If I recall rightly, you can't actually just set the attribute object to nil. You do actually have to return none, I think. Or perhaps it does just set it to none. Anyway, the create view really does need, I think, a model to be sent to it. By this point, we cannot just use data, as in, say, putting a dict onto the dictionary, onto the view. In return, what it does is it auto-saves the information to the declared model. If you'd like to see a create view at work, well, Let's go over here. There we go. Joys of a basic create view from Django. You can see it's asking me for all the information that the model will need. Again, no CSS involved here. This is the default CSS used by the browser. It's usable, you can look at it. And you can see all the fields from the model here. Title, slug, summary, the body of the view, and the author, and a submit button. We'll go back to the submit button and the construction of this whole form in a moment. Let's just return to the view stack. There's also an update view. As I pointed out, this already has detail views, search for object mix in, and in this case it is enabled, so it will be able to retrieve the existing information. Let's have a quick look there. Remember, these URLs are things that I've actually coded into the URL thing. You can have whatever names you like here. Because of the get object mix in, this really ought to come up with information inside the form which I can then modify. Going back to the view stack, there is finally a delete view. Anyone who's constructed web forms before will know that delete views are excuse me, I have a cold and I've worked about 4 hours in a cold shop this morning, so I am now coughing up phlegm as I make this particular video. Anyone who has worked on web forms before knows that delete views are slightly special because perhaps they do retrieve information like an update view, but certainly they can just kill information without any of the complexities of a create or an update view. Let's go back and just see the delete view, if I can remember the URL. There we go. It's just a straightforward more coughing. Confirm form. I'll try to avoid coughing into the microphone. So that's a very quick summary of the Django views stack as it is provided at the current time. If I can just go back and very, very quickly show you what these things look like when they are actually enabled and you have built them into code. Here are our URLs. Here's the paper create, update, delete, the detail, which remember just shows us one item from the models, and the list, which shows us various items from a list of the models. Let's go and look at the views themselves. Here is the paper detail. That really is shockingly simple, isn't it? You can do an awful lot more with it, but there you go. That's the dryness of Django for you. Django is always thinking about such things. Here is the paper list, another one that's shockingly simple. The paper create, it's simply declaring the model we're using and the fields we wish to see in the actual form. Django requires that because it's been found really over the years that it's just too easy to allow hidden information or information that should be protected to get onto the form. So you must be explicit about the fields you're using. Same situation for paper update, and the same for delete. So although the forms look very crude, let's just remind ourselves of what some of the forms look like. Here you go, that's the add, and that's the edit or update. Although they look very crude, by using the stock class-based views, they are actually remarkably simple and very dried out. What I'm not quite showing you yet is these things simply won't function without a template. Let's just dive into the template. If you were just to put this information into a file, you would get an error because you wouldn't get a template. So, I've not bothered naming the templates. I've just used a stock setup, which is to use the model and then the type of form. Let's just look at the form, which covers both create and update. Shall we? Let's look at this template that is needed to form up the HTML return. It's extending a base. It's which is, you know, just the page details you wrap it with. I'm not going to go into that. It's got a title. This is all the same stuff, really. You'll have to look elsewhere in the documentation for this. The key bit is we do need to put form HTML tags around the render. We do need to put an input button on, or we will not be able to enable the form. We do need to set the action to nothing, so it returns to the view, the same view we used to render the form. And I have added a CSRF token, but that's an aside. The form itself will render simply by being placed as form and placed within the brackets to cause it to be seen as a variable. I've used as UL here. You have some options such as table and something else. I'm trying to remember now. Anyway, form itself contains several other additions you can use for rendering. You can override the class and change the form very substantially by using different, for example, form structure, a different form class. That's one way to go. Right. Now, again, ignoring the shape of this, and remembering what the whole structure looks like in the template, which is quite straightforward and dry, as you might hope for from Django. Let's go and have a look at paper detail. template, just to round this out a little bit. You see that here we use the object, or the word object. I think this can be changed somewhere to get hold of the object, and then we render parts of that model. Here is body, here is modification date, and here is the author. If we were just to look at a detailed rendered, here we go with the URLs. Here it is again. We have a title. Now note that I put the title into the template, and then under here we have the body, and that's the name of the author, and the date. Just looking at that title again, you see that came from object title, which was rendered to a slightly different place in the template, used to set up the HTML.